Hello, my name is Christopher DePalma, and this is a tutorial on how to use Ink for Unity. To get started, open your Unity project and go to your Assets folder. Then right-click, Create, and then Ink. You can go ahead and name the Ink file anything, but keep in mind the name of the file is important. Then just double-click it to open. Once you've opened your Ink file, you'll see the following screen. Let's break down all the parts. On the left will be the file browser, which contains all of the Ink files in your current folder. You can open it by clicking the three lines in the top left. You can additionally close it by clicking it again. Next is the Knot browser, which you can open by clicking the cross next to the file browser. This will display all your knots and stitches, but we'll get more back to that later. Next is the center of your screen, which is your workspace. This will contain all of your knots, diverts, texts, and other pieces of your Ink file. And finally, the right is an area where you can playtest your Ink file and make sure everything is working right. Let's start by adding some text. I'm going to add a single line to demonstrate how the Ink file works. So I'll just write out a small sentence. As you can see, on the right side where the playtest is, you are now able to see the text I just wrote. However, it can be quite confusing to keep track of all the text if it's just on its own. We can put them in small groupings called knots. You can do this with double equal spaces, the name of the knot, and another double equal spaces. Now you might notice an error, but we can fix that shortly. To fix the error, we'll need a divert. A divert is an arrow using a dash in the right arrow, and then the text of a knot. The current error is caused because the knot is not leading anywhere. This means that once the Ink file gets to that knot, it will be unsure where to go. We can fix that by adding a divert. A divert is signified using an arrow, which is a dash and a right arrow, and then the name of the knot that it will divert to. Alternatively, you can make it end. A knot is indicated by making an arrow, which is a dash and an arrow symbol, then followed by the name of the knot it is leading to. Alternatively, you can have end, which will end the Ink file when reached. You might notice that the Ink file is not reading any of the text inside of the name function. Let me write out some text to demonstrate. This is because there is nothing diverting to the name. Let's add a divert after our first line. Now, as you can see, because there's a divert to the knot, it will now display the text in the knot playtest. Ink is a powerful tool used for dialogue, especially with choices. Let's add one now. First, a choice is denoted with either an apostrophe or a plus symbol, followed by brackets. An apostrophe indicates that a choice can only be chosen a single time, while a plus symbol indicates that a choice can be chosen multiple times. You might have noticed that there is an error currently with our choices. This is because there is no divert. A choice requires a divert to function. Let's add a divert to both of our options. There's still an error. This is because there's no text within the brackets. Let's add some now. You may now notice that on the playtest section there are now two choices we can click. Clicking either of them will lead to the divert. Let's add another knot in order to see how the two different choices can divert differently. Then we can change one of the choices to divert to the new knot. However, in our playtest, we don't seem to be able to reach these new choices. We can click the arrow on the top right to rewind a single choice. Now we can select one of the choices. Again. And this shows how different choices can work. We can use knots and diverts to create a loop. Let's try that now. First, we'll need to encapsulate our first line in a knot. You might notice that the playtest is no longer able to see our first line. This is because Ink always reads the first line. Let's create a divert to our starting knot. Next, let's make one of the nots that our diverts lead to return back to the start. We'll do this with name. So now, when we select choice A, it will return back to the start. You might notice that A is no longer an option. This is because it was marked with an apostrophe, which means that it cannot be repeated when that not is returned to. Another tool we can use to add further complexity to our dialog system using Ink is conditions. A condition will contain a variable, and if that variable is true, it will read all the text contained within that condition. Let's try to make one now. We'll place it within name2. If you place the name of a not as your variable, it will count if the player has reached that not before. Let's try it now. Oops, looks like I made a small error. B currently only leads to name. Let's go ahead and make it lead to name2 instead. Now, we'll restart the story and try again. As you can see, because we had visited name before, now when we reach name2, the condition is met, and it adds the additional text. Let's demonstrate what happens if we don't go to the correct not. As you can see, because the condition was false, that condition being had we visited the not name, the text did not appear. To get the most out of our conditions, let's add a variable. At the very top, we're going to add the text, full capitalization, VAR, and then the name of our variable. Let's call it variable A. Now at the moment, it is broken. When you're declaring a variable in Ink, you need to declare what type of thing is inside the variable. This can be anything such as an integer, a string, or a boolean. For now, let's just put in an integer. Now let's try replacing our condition with a new variable. Alright, now let's see what happens when we do this. As you can see, no matter what we do, it returns as false. This is because it is attempting to see if there is true or false in this variable. As an integer, it sees nothing, therefore it automatically assumes it is false. However, if we recontextualize the problem, we may be able to get the results we want. Let's try variable a equals 0. And as you can see, now that there is a case for it to be true, it is able to read the condition. In addition to setting variables, we can also manipulate them within Ink. Let's try that now. First, in order to test that our variable can be manipulated, let's change the conditional to be equals 1 instead. Now, as you can see, because the variable is at first set to 0, it will be considered false when reached. Now, let's manipulate the variable. Inside the name not, let's use a tilde symbol with the name of the variable, variable a, and then equals 1. Now, let's reset. So if we start by picking B, the condition will be false, as the variable was never manipulated. But if we go to A, and then B, because A manipulates a variable, it is considered true in B. Keep in mind that there are many different types of variables we can use. For example, we can change this into a boolean. Additionally, we can make variables strings. Keep in mind to keep them in quotation marks if they're going to be strings. We can also post variables within our text. Let's try that now. First, let's change our text to something more recognizable. Let's also change our conditional just to be a little easier. Next, in order to post our text, we're going to need to use curly brackets. And then we'll post the variable's names. Now, as you can see, whenever the variable in curly brackets is reached, it will print out the variable. And, as you can see, it retains any manipulations we make through the Ink code. With games with heavy amounts of dialogue, it can be overwhelming to keep all of it within one Ink file. Thankfully, there's a way to connect different Ink files together. Let's try that now. First, we're going to return to our Unity. Then, we're going to recreate an Ink file. You can do that by right-clicking, Create, Ink. Let's go ahead and name this Tutorial B. Now let's open Tutorial B. Now that we have our second Ink file open, let's go back to the File Explorer. As you'll see on the left, we can see our original Ink file. Let's add some text in the second Ink file. Now that we've done that, let's combine the two files. Returning back to our original file, which we can do through the File Explorer, we need to include the other Ink file. You can do this by adding at the very top, in full caps, include, and then the name of the Ink file. It's very important to include the .ink at the end. Now that we've combined our two files, we should be able to enter the other file's knot. Let's try that now. Using the divert and name2, we're going to enter the knot included in the second file. Let's try it. How strange. It seems nothing's working. That's because our main Ink file is the incorrect one. As you can see in the File Explorer, main Ink file is set to Tutorial B. That means that it's going to be trying to read this file instead of the one we want it to read. To demonstrate this, let's divert to Tutorial Main B. And as you can see, the playtest is showing the Tutorial B Ink file instead of the one we want. We can rectify this by closing the window. Now return to your main Unity file. Before we continue, I want to point out something. You might notice the Tutorial B icon is now different. This indicates that there is an Ink file that leads into it. We can click it and look in the inspector. Master file indicates what Ink files lead into the current file that is selected. Let's open that master file. Before we test our code, we're going to need to remove the divert in Tutorial B that is used for demonstration purposes. As you can see, it is now reading the correct file. Let's test it to see if it works. And as you can see, it is reading text from our Tutorial B. This means that they are correctly implemented together. These are all the tools that you'll need to get started using Ink. I hope this tutorial has been helpful, and I wish you luck on your endeavors writing dialogue.